Lizette, what did he do to your life?
He ruined it.
Tell us how.
I was an up-and-coming singer. I was a girl full of life, very innocent but very driven, and preyed upon basically at the mall in Aventura, Florida, and promised just a mentorship and quickly turned into, I would just say, a sex slave.
Lizette Martinez, also known as Jane Doe number 9, was one of R. Kelly's victims. She was speaking there about what he had done to her. As you heard her mention there, victim targeted at a mall. If it can get more stereotypical than that, let's go to more details because he at least is getting some punishment. Now, disgraced R&B singer R. Kelly was sentenced to 30 years in prison Wednesday following his conviction last year on federal racketeering and sex trafficking charges stemming from his efforts over years to use his fame and ensnare victims he sexually abused. The 5-week federal trial in Brooklyn included testimony from witnesses who said they were sexually and physically abused by Kelly. The court also heard from people involved with orchestrating the disgraced R&B singer's '94 marriage to the late singer Aaliyah when she was just 15 years old. And he was an adult after she believed she'd gotten pregnant. Now, as many people know, if you followed this at all, these accusations have been mounting and building over decades, and they're getting worse and worse with the details. So in addition to her words, that victim there at the top, Martinez, after he was sentenced, here are some of these other statements from victims that they made prior to the sentencing, which I hope added some years on, which I still don't think 30 is enough. Another person said, I was a teenager and you were a pedophile, ready to ruin another young lady's life. You made me do things that broke me. I literally wished that I could die because of how you made me feel. Wish I'd have given you guys a trigger warning before this because these feelings are very common amongst assault victims. So continue on. I don't know if I'll ever be whole. What you did has left a permanent stain on my life that I will never be able to wash away. I'm sure you never think about that. Of course they don't. More because Kelly still has to face an August 15th trial in Chicago. There's more on federal charges for producing child porn. So US District Judge Ann M. Donnelly presided over the federal trial in Brooklyn, said in court that a few crimes are more serious than what Mr. Kelly did, and that he had manipulated girls and women. You taught them that love is enslavement and violence, is what the judge said, recalling the scenarios he created to wreak primal humiliation on them. This case is not about sex, it's about violence and cruelty and control. You had a system in place that lured young people into your orbit, and then you took over their lives. Now, really fast, Rick, before you jump in, I wanna remind you guys of this. R. Kelly is now looking to appeal, as most people would do. We talked about Ghislaine Maxwell the other day, and all of her child sex and trafficking charges that she's up on and now has been sentenced to as well. They're both gonna be doing their appeals. Now, R. Kelly has decided to take up this particular attorney, Jennifer Bongine, and she's now defending him as well. He fired his legal team and hired her. Why, Rick? Because she's the one who got Bill Cosby off of his charges.
Yep, took the words right out of my mouth. So, look, there's a lot to it. I think if you really wanted to get a better perspective than however long this clip may be, you need to watch Surviving R. Kelly. It is a must watch.
It's horrific for everyone.
It's horrific.
It's very detailed. You don't want to necessarily be triggered by that, but yes.
You hear from the victims. You hear how it was in his circles systemic on how they preyed on these girls, not women, but girls. They would go to the mall, as you heard one victim say, they would go to local McDonald's and give out R. Kelly's phone number. And then the physical torture, but also the mental torture that occurred wherever his place of residence may have been at the time. A lot of times it was Chicago, is horrendous. Now, one thing that's disgusted me is seeing and hearing somebody like, a special shout out to him, someone like Lil Boosie, who will go on a show and say, yeah, what he did was terrible, but let me tell you something, man. If he were to go on a Versus, he would wash everybody. Nobody wants to hear that, bro. Nobody wants to hear like, hey, you know what he'd do really well at? That company on Instagram Live that totally killed it during lockdown. Like,
Yep.
it's so weird to me how he's been found guilty, and then there's more victims and more victims and more victims, and yet there's still this complex of like, yeah, but his songs are good. Did you listen to his songs? Do you know what he's writing about and singing about? Like, this continuous defense of his art is pathetic to me. And we're still seeing it. And the Boosie interview with Vlad, and I've seen other people talk about this as well. Like, it needs to stop completely, because we know what he was singing about and we know what he was doing when he wrote those songs.
You're only able to do that if you overlook the humanity of the folks that were victims. If you can't put yourselves in their positions, if you can't understand what happened to them, you're able to overlook it and think, oh, but I love that one song from '94. That's the only way you can do it.
Boosie also ripped Dwayne Wade's trans child as well. Like, this is a dude who has a history of just like being on the wrong side of so many things, but this is just another.
It seems like at the point where this become, let's just go for all bad takes from that point of view.